Native English speakers don't exactly have the best reputation for learning other languages and speaking them well. And I can get away with saying that because I am one. People are always so shocked when I speak Portuguese here in Portugal because I don't sound like an English person, and it's frankly unusual for someone English to be as fluent in Portuguese as I am. So if you are an English speaker and feel like your Portuguese is feeling stiff and unnatural and you just can't shake that English or American accent, then today's video is for you, because I'm going to walk you through the 5 mistakes you're probably making and how to fix them so that you can impress those around you with your Portuguese too. And I have been dreadfully ill this week, as you can hear, so I hope I can do this right. I've taught hundreds of students these tricks over the last few years inside my Portuguese Pro program for beginners, where I teach people to go from saying their very first words up to having their first conversations with natives in a matter of months. So if you want to find out how to join us, I'll leave my free taster lesson for you in the description so you can get on the path to being conversational in Portuguese today. So the first mistake I see English speakers make all the time is incorrectly pronouncing common diphthongs in Portuguese. And what does that mean? Well, it's just a fancy linguistic term for a pair of vowels that work together to form one sound. So let's test you. When you see these 2 vowel pairs, how do you pronounce them? My guess is you said oo, like the name Louise, and you, like in neutral. And that is just not how we pronounce those in Portuguese, and that is one of the things that is going to give you away. So let's start with the OU. I remember this being so hard in my very first Portuguese class that I took at university, and we were trying to learn to say the word soul. I just couldn't master that OU sound. It felt so unnatural to my mouth. So here's how we do it. We say each of the vowels individually first. O, U. O, oo. So a nice round open O and then an oo. Now that we've got those 2 sounds, we want to think about sliding from the first one into the second one. We don't want to hear 2 syllables. We want to make it into 1 syllable. So try this with me. O, O. And that's the sound you need to be making in words like soul and vou. The second one, the EU, I can't tell you how many times I have to correct this in my live sessions with my students, again, because we're used to saying words like Europe. So we have that y at the beginning when we see an EU in Portuguese. Remember how we form these? We have to start with the letters individually first. So this is going to be e, u, e, ooh. So you can see that our entry point into the word isn't a y, it's an e. And if you get this right, that's how you're going to master this sound, okay? So we want to do this. Practice with me. Eu, eu. And that's how we can correctly say things like obrigada eu, or the word euros, which all my students struggle with. So the next most common mistake is Englishizing your words, because sometimes you will see a word in Portuguese that looks so similar to the English that you're just going to say it in your own English or American accent. So let's look at this word. How would you pronounce this? You're probably saying chocolate and thinking that's kind of good enough because it's a teeny bit different, but no, we really need to remember our pronunciation rules, okay? And if you haven't done a deep dive into the Portuguese pronunciation rules, I do have a free pronunciation guide with 7 of the most difficult sounds with native speaker audio, so download that, it's in the description and it's really gonna help. So let's break this word down. First of all, the CH is not gonna be a ch, it's gonna be a sh. So that's our first place to start. And then with the O's, this is such a tempting one to just fall back to your own vowels. But if we can get the vowels right, that's how we're going to sound so Portuguese, okay? So here I want you to make them more into those oo sounds, okay? Chocolate. Okay, that final E is also so important. We get tempted to stress it too much, but remember it should be a closed E happening in the throat. Chocolate. Okay, next word, have a go at this. So you might have said cliente because it's very similar to the English, but it's the I. Again, it's the vowels that are giving us away. So when you see the I in Portuguese, I want you to remember that it's an E sound. So this isn't client, it's client, okay? Watch out for the I's. And finally, this word. Very important, you're all going to need it when you are here in Portugal. Again, in English, we say menu. We have a y sound in there again between the N and the U. We don't have that in Portuguese. I want you to remember when you see a U, it should be a very straightforward U. So this is menu, menu, not menu. The third mistake is getting gender wrong. And this is such an obvious one because we simply don't have this in English. I don't know if a table or a croissant is masculine or feminine because we just don't use it. So you're going to need some clues to help you with this, to remember when something's going to be masculine or feminine. And it's not as simple as just seeing if a word ends in an O or an A, because there are some exceptions to that rule, which I'm going to show you now. So I wish that we could cover this in an exhaustive way that's going to solve all your problems, but languages are a bit more complicated than that. So what I'm going to do is give you some guidelines that are going to help you make some good educated guesses, okay? When a word ends in O, L, R, or MA, we can assume that those words are going to be masculine. For example, o papel, o colar, o cinema. So already you've got lots of clues to look out for masculine words. What about the tricks for feminine words? Well, words ending in an an which is a nasal A, ad, gem, and são, we can guess that those are going to be feminine words. For example, a viagem, a estação, okay? By looking out for those endings, we can give a good guess as to whether something is going to be a masculine or feminine word. Something I always tell my students to do is when you're learning a new piece of vocabulary, check out what the gender is as well and make a note of that at the same time. So instead of just learning the word for bus, you're going to learn the bus, o autocarro, and that's going to remind me that it's a masculine word. The fourth mistake is a doozy, and it's prepositions. Again, what does that mean, Liz? Well, those are those tiny little words that explain the relationship between two things in a sentence. So words like in, on, at, to. So when I say, for example, the cat is on the sofa, I'm explaining the relation of where the cat is in relation to the sofa, and we're going to use on in that case. The problem with prepositions is they don't translate simply from one language to the next. I can't learn the word for on in Portuguese and use that everywhere where I would use the preposition on in English. It just doesn't work like that. So this is actually an entire module in my course because it really is complicated. You have to learn a lot of different rules and guidelines. But the best tip that I can give you today is try and understand or look out for when you're doing your reading practice, for example, which prepositions are going to go with which verb. So for example, the verb esperar when we're meaning to wait. Now in English we say waiting for someone, and in Portuguese there are two prepositions that often fill the spot of for. It's por and para. So to make this easy for myself, I'm just going to learn the rule that when I'm using the verb esperar, I'm always going to put the preposition por with it. For example, vou esperar por ti. I'm going to wait for you. So just to demonstrate how these don't always correspond, in English, when you dream about someone, okay, we use the preposition about. I dreamt about Cristiano Ronaldo, for example. But in Portuguese, we're going to say sonhar com, sonhei com ele. I dreamt about him. So this is the best tip I can give you. Understand which verbs call for which prepositions. And I actually did buy a really cool book on this that's kind of like a dictionary of verbs and the explanation of how you use prepositions with them. I'll link it in the description. It's just a simple kind of grammatical book, because again, one verb can go with several different prepositions, which is going to give that verb several different meanings. So if you do want to learn this, this book is a really good place to go. The final mistake is thinking that you can get by just learning English, or God forbid, using your Spanish. Now, of course, you can get by day to day, especially if you're living in a big city, if you only know English. But what I have found with my students, and this is the reason that I teach, there is going to be so much more available to you if you make the effort to learn Portuguese. You are going to have such a superior experience by actually making connections with local people. I've done a ton of interviews with my own students who talk about their story learning Portuguese. It's always very inspiring. And the common thread that runs through all of these stories is how much joy they have had connecting with their local communities. So this might be joining a hiking group, or joining a knitting group, or taking part in a rambling group, or the local festival that's happening in that town. These are the kind of experiences that go from just living somewhere to actually loving your life somewhere and fitting in. So I would urge everybody, even if you think it's too hard, let's make a start on your Portuguese and see what difference it can make to your day-to-day life here. If you want to get started with that but don't know where to go, because there is an overwhelming amount of resources available online now, I have a free 60-minute lesson for beginners that is going to get you on the right track for pronunciation, understanding real-life Portuguese, and covering the essential grammar that you need to get started. It's like a quick start guide to getting conversational, and I highly recommend you go and register for it. The link is in the description. I'll be back next week with more tips and tutorials to help you build your confidence and conversation skills in Portuguese. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a thing. Ciao for now.